welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Flecha, and joining me as usual is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, how you doing, man?
Good. I really like iced coffee, but we don't have iced coffee in the office. So I just decided to kind of kludge something together. I just took, the coffee and then put ice in it. And I feel like I've created something new here. I mean, is it great? Maybe, maybe not. But I feel like, you can hack some stuff together. You can make stuff happen on the timeline you need. So
I like it. I love your segues always. I actually chat GPT today and said, what segue is John going to come up with today? We're talking about, I wanted to see if it could get you right. It did not. It came up with a way cheesier one, but that was good. Yeah. So very good. We are talking about things that can be very difficult, right? And then how we make them easier. We're talking about what's new in VMware Cloud Foundation in the area of APIs, SDKs, but also PowerCLI. We are not alone. We are joined by some good friends. Anybody in the industry that's probably read a blog about some of these things like PowerCLI might already know Jatin. Jatin, welcome back to Virtually Speaking.
Thank you so much, Pete. I think today is the day where I'm very much tired, and I think you kind of very gracious in saying that it's okay to be tired. But yeah, it's you guys. So I'm really excited about talking about what we have done in API, SDK, PowerCL, and some of the automation tooling that we have. So thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, and you're not alone. We're also first time on the podcast as a product manager for some of these things. Angel Petrov. Angel, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys. It's my first time. It's my debut here, so I hope it's the first but not the last one.
There we go.
Today we're going to talk about many improvements, many new and cool features that our customers are asking for quite a while, and finally we have a good news for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Angel, why don't we start with you? I know there's we're going to dive a little deeper and get into the various aspects. There's a couple of different things that we want to talk about, but maybe just high level sort of what is actually new in VCF as it pertains to some of these things like APIs, SDKs.
Yeah, we try to collect this as a single swipe, but what is the problem when you try to collect everything is one swipe is you have so many text. And at the end, you cannot cover everything. But here are the more important milestones that we achieve with VCF 9.0. And I would start with I would say it's just one of all of those, but it's one of the greatest one. It's a unified VCF SDK. Before VCF 9.0, we have many SDKs for different components of VCF for different products back in the days. And those SDKs do not work as a whole. They do not work together. So with the unified VCF SDK, we start binding all these SDKs, have a common third-party libraries, third-party dependencies, and all this stuff. Make the installation, make the delivery much more easier for our customers. And at the end, we have a unified VCF SDK for Python and Java for some of the core components of VCF, which is vSphere, vSun, VCF Installer, and SDDC Manager. And this just the first milestone, just the first deliverable. We are not going to stop. We are going to onboard also the other of the components. NSX Ops automation is on its way. So yeah, we are having so many things to work on, but the first milestone is already put on the table, and this is the unified VCF SDK.
This is really interesting and important, and I think back, there was a partner, I think it was Russell Pope, who every time I met him for, I feel like the past 10 years, he's like, so when are y'all fixing your APIs? When are you fixing your SDK? Because at its core, like we've had good stuff, but the challenge is we have all these products, and in many cases, these products, some were built by us, some were acquired. I mean, there's M&A involved, and just very different. And it's like you go through and you're like, okay, I'm going to use Python here. I'm going to use Ruby here. Why am I using Ruby? Christian really liked Ruby, I guess. I don't know. Like you. And it was kind of maddening, and you're like, oh, this REST API is really great. Oh, this SOAP API is terrible. I hate SOAP. You would just bounce through stuff, and there's been this story, that Krish and Anu and others have told us that like we're unifying the engineering here, we're unifying the products, but it's good to see, and it's interesting to see that coming together on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, in addition, I can add just one thing. Imagine you're using your vSun Java library, which requires Java 8, for example. You
Yep.
set up your environment, you install Java 8, and then you bring up the vSphere Java SDK, and it requires Java 11. So what I'm doing, by the way, I have things and all this stuff. So we fixed that. Today everything is aligned, and we will continue aligning on that direction. And
I
it's
love
one
that.
thing I said. The other thing, you barely touch it about the SOAP and REST APIs. You know, the SOAP APIs are covering one of the most important functionalities that we are providing as a platform. This is the VM creation, host management, visa, and all this stuff. And when I jump into the VMware, I was about let's rewrite them. Let's write REST APIs. Let's provide REST APIs. It's an easy call. But then you realize that the whole world must rewrite their own solutions, their own integration, and it's become huge. So what we did is actually we restify. It's a new terminology I using here.
I hadn't heard
We
that one.
made the APIs a REST-like. We introduced this new VI JSON protocol. So we translated the SOAP XML to this JSON REST world. And what we did is actually we convert all the SOAP APIs to this new JSON protocol, and we built OpenAPI. OpenAPI 3.0 as a standard across all the legacy APIs, and on top, all the VCF. Almost 90% of all of the VCF APIs today are supporting OpenAPI 3.0. So this kind of alignment, and it's a
Oh.
huge milestone we achieved. Yeah.
So for those that are not as skilled in the area of the various APIs, what are some of the differences between, say, like SOAP APIs and REST APIs?
And so I think let's go back to some historical facts about the inception of some of these APIs. I think let's begin with the SOAP. So it stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. SOAP, in its nature itself, is a protocol, just like HTTPS or any other protocol that we work with, right? It was introduced way early in, I think, 1990s or probably early 2000 by Microsoft. And it was basically a standard protocol between different web services to interact with each other and then process the data, exchange the data between the services. And that's what the inception of web service looked like. uh, if you are the user, if you have to understand the SOAP, if you are using an XML document in your APIs, you are most likely using the SOAP APIs. Then comes the REST are fairly new, but the fundamental difference is the REST APIs are not the protocol, but they are kind of a framework which provides certain guidance. You don't have to follow all these guidance, but it's kind of set of recommendations, set of guidance around the API framework and how the API should really look like. So if you look and compare and contrast, right, SOAP does require you to follow a very strict protocol. You cannot deviate from the protocol to its nature. REST, yes, the framework is there, the recommendations are there, but developers have the ability to pick and choose how they would like to build their REST APIs. REST is purposefully built for web services. It only supports HTTPS, and the data protocol that REST uses, which is very famous one, which is the JSON. There are other data protocols which are also used, but JSON is something which predominantly very popular in the REST API. The one key over here is on the SOAP APIs, it does follow a very strict protocol in its nature. REST gives you a more abstracted way of providing your APIs. So that's where the difference actually lies in. Now, in our context, right? If we have to understand it, all of our core services, which are like literally building our core platform, like ESXi, the vCenter, the vSAN, these are very old technologies, but having an old technology doesn't mean that it's not really useful, right? It's a core services. So anything that is core services, it's actually offered as a SOAP API because these services are there for decades now, right? and that's why they are offered in SOAP. But if you see the newer VMware services, those services are offered in REST API, and we have pretty much REST-like coverage for anything that comes new in the VCF. So if I have to put it up, right, the challenges that we have is we have core services which are offered in SOAP APIs. Why? Because it's a very decade-old investment that we have made into. All the new APIs that are coming up, they are coming up in the REST-like experience, and all the developers that we have in this day and age would love to work with REST, and that's kind of crux of our API base that we have at VMware.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I like that you've that restified that whole being able to, so to speak, still interact with the SOAP, but do so in a more modern way
Yeah,
that sounds much more comfortable.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think if we have to stress on this a little bit more, I think it's very important. So what we have done is we have the SOAP API endpoints. These are basically the endpoints to which an API request is processed through. You can also call it as an API server. What we have done is we have just introduced another wire protocol. And when I say wire, it means the way you interact with the data through API request and response. It happens on JSON RPC, right? And we call it as virtual infrastructure JSON protocol. That's VI JSON. You will receive the same object, you will receive the same output. It's just that now you have a REST-like API to interact with. I think this journey was started, I think, in 8 update 1 or beginning of vSphere 8 itself. Um, we pretty much covered virtual infrastructure management, which is your core ESXi APIs, virtual machine APIs, the ESX Agent Manager API, the storage lifecycle management, the storage monitoring services, the storage policy services. We covered VI JSON APIs until vSphere 8 update 3. So that milestone was achieved then and there itself. It's just that we haven't communicated it loudly because the vSAN piece was still pending. With VCF 9, the vSAN and SOAP endpoint also has the REST-like equivalent available in VI JSON. So that's kind of crux of what has been done on restification of our API endpoints, and that's very important.
Yeah, and I know, and I don't know either of you can take this, but like, what are some of these expectations for customers as it pertains to the VCF API specifically?
Oh, yes. So there are a few things which we have to understand first, and I think if you can pull up what an API is, because that's really an important aspect in this particular conversation.
Okay.
Most of us, right? If I go into any session and if I say how many of you are using PowerCLI, immediately pretty much 99% people will raise their hand and say, yes, I'm using PowerCLI. If we ask them if you are using APIs, the answer is probably not, right? Uh, Especially the administrator community. They don't use APIs directly. What they use is they use API clients. PowerCLI is just one of the API client. The vSphere UI, all the user interfaces that you see, those are also consuming the APIs behind the scene. So in its nature, what an API is, you have an API client, which can be a postman, which can be a programmatical client, which we call it as SDK, or it can be very well be your web browser. It sends a request, and the request goes to an API server. In our case, the API servers can be vCenter, ESX, NSX Manager, VCF Automation, any appliance or any management interface that we have. It is considered as an API server. And then, depending on what is the API server, how the API is written, you basically interact with either SOAP API or REST API. And we have briefly discussed about both of these APIs, right? So what are we looking at? We are looking at a very large set of API servers. And just to give you an example, for vSphere Automation API, the number of APIs that we have under this single API server is 1,275, to be very precise. If I combine the number of APIs we offer across different API servers, right, and when I say API server, please consider it as a VCF component, the number actually grows significantly. As Engel said, right, the one of the challenge in the whole unification story was, okay, the vSAN is working on, let's say, is compatible on, let's say, Java 8. vSphere is on, let's say, Java 11. That's not really a consistent experience.
Yep.
If we have to fix that experience, first we have to fix the API. Without fixing the API, the more and more tooling we add to our list, it's complicate the problem in the long run, right? So what we have done is we have taken a step back, fixed some of our APIs, made sure that we provide open API specification to all of these APIs. It ensures few things. It ensures consistency across all the API endpoints. People know how to interact with either of these APIs, and then it does improve the API documentation as well, right? So the consistency to bring on the tooling side requires consistency on the API side as well. So while you may not be interacting with the APIs directly, but you will be seeing a significant performance improvement in some of your operations. Let me give you an example. I have used PowerCLI quite a lot. If you use something like VPC module, which is the virtual private cloud module, it's a very new module written with the new APIs. It is lightning fast. Trust me. And when I say this, I say it with a lot of experience coming from. And the difference that you see in this performance, why it is happening, because we have done a fundamental overhaul in our API story. So that's just one of the ways to look at it. So in future, if you see improved automation tooling across our PowerCLI, SDK, Terraform, and Sybil, we are able to deliver it because we are fixing our core API story, and that's really important to communicate within the community itself.
Yeah. I do remember working on some PowerCLI commandlets for Veeam. We were doing some backups and
Backup integration,
managing some of the snapshots and how it does things and doing all the reporting. But I do remember at that time there was just a limitation. There was just not as many, and it certainly wasn't a one-for-one for the full API as it was in PowerCLI. There was certainly a lot of limitations back then. Is that all? Has that changed?
Yeah, it changed significantly. We introduced so many new modules, so this means so many new commandlets. We introduced something that we call internally low-level commandlets or auto-generated commandlets, and these are our SDK modules, which means that once we release the new version, we are immediately releasing all the new capabilities, because usually, like you said, you have previous experience with PowerCLI commandlets. You know those are high level handcrafted commandlets, and it requires some time. So you need to have released the new version of the API with the new capabilities. Then on top, you are building this client and you are building these new commandlets. And now it's not the case. We took the OpenAPI. So see what the connection is. We took the OpenAPI and we auto generate immediately, and we released the new VCF PowerCLI version right away together with the VCF on the next day or even the same day. So we have these new capabilities immediately. Uh, in Nino, I can mention few new modules. One is the VPC that Jatin already mentioned. It's coming and it's with high level or handcrafted commandlets, because we want to simplify a lot this experience for the VI admin to start using the VPCs. On the other hand, we have an SDK built for VCF installer, our brand new VCF installer. We have a new module for VCF operations, which covers the whole operations API. So we have bindings for that one. We have auto-generated new cool features like global authorization API. You know, it's an API that our customers are asking from more than decade. Give me, I have many customer calls when they said, give me a way, they give me a programmatical way to manage all the roles, all the permissions, and creating users and all this stuff. I know we have it through the user interface on the vSphere, but we don't have it through the API, public API. So we deliver it, and which is more important, we provide the commandlets right away at the same time when we release the VCF 9.0. So these are very cool new features that we built, and I'm sure that Jatin can add even more because he's using a lot the new version of PowerCLI.
I think I'll go back to the question that you asked, Pete. Like, how does it change the customer experience? So let me give you an example. You did pull out our experience of working together on vSAN and Veeam backups, right? Um, think about this. I just highlighted 1275 APIs that vSphere Automation API has, right? This is our REST API surface. Now, if you look at this picture, right, if we combine the number of APIs, probably it will go more than 10,000 or 10,000 or so. Building a one-to-one PowerCLI cmdlet is not really a scalable way in this kind of scenario when you have a very large API surface. So what we have the OpenAPI specification. We push it to our own API generator, which handles the OpenAPI specification and spits out PowerCLI modules automatically. Truth to be told, some of the PowerCLI modules that you see and some of the cmdlets that you see are not something which somebody has written manually. These are auto-generated cmdlets. How we are doing it? Because we have something called OpenAPI, right?
ChatGPT.
No,
I
ChatGPT.
do like the idea though of like if you fix the APIs first, then you can automate creating the SDKs or the
Right.
PowerCLI commandlets. Like everything works, and this very much goes to like the modern API first world and what the promise was supposed to be versus the old world to where okay, we built things and then after the fact we built an API that might have interacted in a completely different way than the UI did. And so you'd have different behaviors or oddities or things would break on updates. Um, and this is kind of exciting because on one hand you're automating the building of tooling for customers, but then
Right.
they go take their AI model they want to go train on and then have that go help them go write that automation on top of it. So it does feel like AI is that or automation and AI can come together here even more in the future.
So, since we are talking about AI, and it is so coincidental that Angle just shared one conference page with me. I can't talk about in detail what entails in that particular documentation, but I will go over what's already been available and what I have discovered, whatever is available right now. And if required, people can give it a go and figure it out on themselves, right? What I think Angle is working on is the API 2.0, if I have to put it in this way, where now we have the REST APIs, we have the Open API spec. How can we provide AI/ML models, the tooling, and the skill set so that they can spit out the code on its own? But even before doing that, if you are a GitHub user and if you have access to GitHub Copilot, just do this a small experiment and do let us know. Do reach out to us. How does it feel to you? Just write a PowerShell script, and without writing the PowerShell script, just write a single comment, which is like not writing a code, just a very simple comment in a natural language. Create a virtual machine with SCSI controller, add second hard disk with 90 gig of, let's say, capacity, and add it to an NVMe controller, and just hit a tab and see what Copilot does to you. It automatically creates the code for you. It automatically generates the PowerCLI. How I figured out, I was actually creating a PowerCLI demo and I was just commenting out my code, and I had access to Copilot and it started spitting out the code on its own.
Wait,
Where
wait, wait.
the
You were just commenting? You were just literally like native language, sort
Yes,
of just commenting what this is supposed to do, and it took that and actually generated the code?
exactly. Not even that. I also asked Copilot, just write a comment, create a function. Okay, I'll create a function, let's say new test VM. Give this function a parameter and make sure that there are some parameter validations available in those functions. Copilot did created the function definition for me,
Hmm.
right? Now, where is our role come into the picture? And again, I'll go back on the APIs. As long as we have the right API standards, right API specification, all the tooling that is available out there in the world, right? The Chat GPT, the Gork, or even Copilot, reach the same information which is available in the public domain. So if we fix our APIs, we give a very structured input to all these data models to facilitate more on the cord chain process in your environment. So even though we haven't done anything superficial on our side, we just fixed some of our documentation. We just provided our API specifications, and what we see is the experience of working with all these AIML tools is really gaining a lot of traction. So, and I think that that's where the roadmap also looks like. We want to make sure that our API documentation is good, our PowerCLI documentation is good, so that it can be fed to any LLM models and help you with write your code with all these AI/ML models. So that's really fascinating.
That is an interesting angle of we have to fix the documentation for customers. No. Well, maybe eventually, but for the language models, so that then they can help the customer. It's
Exactly.
but this has been a problem. I feel like of like like there's a meta discussion on documentation in the wild of like, well, we need to write better documentation. What's been in the documentation for 3 years? You never read it. And the amount of documentation that, and this isn't like, a slight at our engineering or anybody. It's like, or the customer who doesn't have time to read all this stuff. I mean, if you export the full documentation of the entire VCF stack, it's probably taller than I am if you printed it, and you could kill a man if you like put it in a box and threw it at him with. So we have reached a point of there's too much documentation, too long, didn't read. Everyone has Pete's attention span here.
Yes.
But if we write really good documentation, the AI will read it and help us craft really, really cool stuff. And going back, I think it was like 8 years ago, people were like finding ways to create a VM with Alexa, and it was very kludgy and but now we're at a way that this stuff is like 500 times better. But this is an interesting angle I hadn't thought of. It'll read the documentation for me, which is great. So
Yeah. Even that was a surprise for me, because I have never used Copilot like for literally building the scripts, and I was simply writing basic pre-checks of which I do for all my scripts, right? And it started populating the code on its own, and I'm like, oh, this is really great. I should let Engel also know about it. So probably in days to come, me and Engel will discuss more and more on some of these things and see how we can actually bake these things in a very secure way, and in scalable way, so that these features can be available to you as well. But even though we don't do anything on this side, if you have GitHub Copilot or some of these AIML tools, give it a try. There's no harm in doing that. Make sure that you try it first in the POC environment, and then take it up in your production. Little disclaimer over there.
Nice.
makes sense.
Well, yeah, let's keep moving. I want to talk a little bit about this new unified VCF SDK for VCF 9.0. What can you tell me?
Yeah. So since you both come from vSAN background, how about if I tell you that to use VCF stack, you have to install vSphere SDK, which is a very famous one in Python, which is PyVMomi. You can install it from online, which is PyP, which is kind of a online repository. But to work with the vSAN, you have to download a zip file, follow a 2-page documentation, which we feel is sufficient enough to give you all the details, and then eventually end up in with some of the errors and trial and error method to get that vSAN SDK working. Then once you set that up and start working, and then you figure out, okay, to authenticate with vSAN, you have to use a different mechanism, and then the authentication that you have done with vSphere doesn't work with the vSAN APIs, and the story goes very complex, right? That has been the experience so far, unfortunately. Why it is so? Why that experience? I think there is a history to it. Anyways, fast forward to VCF 9. What we are doing is we are combining all these SDKs into a single deliverable unit, which we call it as Unified VCF SDK. If you are a Python developer, you should look for VCF Python SDK. And if you are a Java developer, you should look for VCF Java SDK. To begin with, the components includes vSphere, VMware vSphere APIs, which also include both SOAP and REST APIs. It also includes the vSAN API, which are basically the SOAP API. The SDDC manager is the new component in the VCF SDK. vSAN data protection, again, SOAP APIs, and then the VCF installer. All of these components like SDDC manager and VCF installer, they never had any SDK to begin with. Okay, so we are introducing these two components fairly new, but the rest of the SDKs were literally the separate SDKs, separate installation and binaries that you have to work with. So we are combining this and providing in two language bindings. One is Python and the second one is Java, and we will touch base on why these two language bindings in later on. But what you can do now with Unified SDK, let's say if you are a Python developer, this SDK is available directly on PyPy. You can simply run a single command, which is pip install VCF SDK. It will install all the prerequisite, all the modules that you need to work with these components in a single go. It will fetch the repository from online and it will do the installation for you, including the required third-party plugins that some of these packages might require. If you are a Java developer, you can do the same thing with Maven as well, which is a package repository for Java. You just include these dependency in your project file, and you can literally get the Java SDKs from the online repository. So what we are simplifying is we are actually simplifying the delivery mechanism of how we provide our SDKs, the consistency across the authentication and some of its usability aspect, and the more important thing, which is crazy enough, we are in 2025. Okay, and if you are consuming an SDK, which is kind of an API client library in any of your code editor, and if code editor doesn't give you auto completion hints, then we are really backward in our experience. So the unified SDK does solve that as well. Now, all of our client APIs, the bindings, if you are working with any editor, it will give you a type hint, which you can get in any of the IDE, and you can select one of these probable options, and you can get started with your development. It's very simple, small improvements, but very important one, and that's what we are delivering with the unified VCF SDK.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to stop writing my automation in Vim. I got it. So
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, even if you are writing your code in let's say Visual Studio, but if it was a VCF 9.0 pre-era, it would felt like a Vim experience.
no, that's fair, and that is something that it is interesting. Just some of the complaints I remember against PowerCLI and PowerShell, just in general back in the day, is this stuff is incredibly verbose, very lots of words. Like it's gonna make my knuckles hurt typing all that. But having that autocomplete stuff, having that capability is really nice.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
improve quality of life.
Is that what the
absolutely.
majority of folks use, is Python and Java? What if we're using something else?
Yeah. So, and I'll let Engel also talk about some of these numbers and some of these stats, because he has more stats and more awareness about what community is actually using. But I would conclude saying this: PowerShell or PowerCLI is still relevant. Terraform, Ansible, these tools are still relevant. But if we look at from the use case point of view, uh, they are used by most of the cloud admins, right? Who are provisioning the resources or who are building their own tooling on top of what's been available. They mainly use Terraform, PowerCLI, and Ansible. But if we look at our partner side of the business, right, where take an example of Veeam, they are building backup solutions which works with VCF. They are essentially building their own services on top of what VCF provides, right? And to build these services, especially the web services and some of the things that the providers does on their side, happens through mostly Python and Java. What we have observed is most of our community, especially when it comes to the programming language, they consume more Python or Java. So that's why we prioritize these two SDKs. We kind of deprecated, not kind of, we deprecated .NET, Ruby, Perl SDKs, which used to exist, because there is inconsistency available on those SDKs side, and we can't fulfill all the programming languages all at one go, right? So we kind of prioritize Python and Java, And then if you require to build your SDK, let's say in .NET, you can use the OpenAPI, generate your own SDK, and then get ahead with it. So that's really an important use case over there.
I'm gonna go build my own SDK now.
Yeah. That's it right
By the
there.
way, we have one colleague that used the OpenAPI and he builds already a vSphere Rust SDK. It's an open
Yes.
source. You can do the same for all the other components that provides OpenAPI of VCF. So try the Rust.
That sounds
and
both
what
exciting and frightening at the same time.
yeah, let me keep some concerns out of the gate now. So what you are seeing is basically the OpenAPI documentation. Yes, we are talking about the SDK generation, but even before we go ahead with that part, let me bring a very simple aspect of what is an OpenAPI is and what exactly it does. So what you are seeing is on the very left side, which is kind of a block diagram, which basically says the basic building block of what an OpenAPI is, right? Now, if you look at this information, it's basically a way to structurally document what an API is, right? That's all it is. What you are seeing in the middle section is basically the actual OpenAPI documentation of one of our API endpoint, which is VI JSON. It's a YAML document, easily readable, and you can then fed it into, let's say, a tool called OpenAPI Generator. But before I actually go and talk about the OpenAPI Generator, one thing that you can do, you can import this OpenAPI specification into a tool like Postman and create the Postman collection automatically. Why it is important? Because when you learn the APIs, the learning curve itself is a huge undertaking, because you have to understand what is a request, what is the response, what are the parameters I can send to an API. What OpenAPI does is, if you import this specification into a tool like Postman, the parameters, the response, uh, everything is created automatically for you, and you have basically a ready to use Postman collection out there. Similarly, the another use case is you can use a tool like OpenAPI Generator or Kyoto, and you can say, okay, VMware doesn't give me Python, doesn't give me, let's say, a TypeScript SDK. You can tell to OpenAPI Generator, okay, this is the API specification. Give me a TypeScript SDK. It's a single command. You just enter it. You get a working SDK available to use. So that's kind of very niche use case, but I feel it is still important for those who don't use Python and Java. They can use the OpenAPI spec and generate their own SDK using some of these tools that we have talked about. So we have introduced a new blog post about getting started with PowerCLI SDK, which are like the auto-generated cmdlets that we have been talking about. And by the way, from our side, we use OpenAPI to generate that SDK. So that's available now. The one thing which we didn't talk about is the API changelog. Again, very small thing, but I would say a very fundamental thing in the larger scheme of things. So far, when we used to do the release notes never included the API changelog, or I would say we never had the API changelog. So now, if you are a developer who consumes the VCF API, there was no way for you to understand what's been deprecated, what's being announced as new in a specific component, and what is going to be deleted as an operation. All of those things are now available in API changelog. This API changelog is available for SDK as well as it is available now for PowerCLI as well. Very important thing. We have a huge PowerCLI community, and they also need to understand what's been deprecated and what's been changed in some of those PowerCLI cmdlets. So we are covering that as well. And this is the first time release notes include the API changelog, the API specific release notes, and also the deprecation announcement of some of our APIs. And that's really a great resource for everyone to look at. We are working on some of the demos, which will obviously come out in times to come. But then there are a few blog posts that you can right away, check out. The global authorization APIs. This is the first time we are now have the content which talks about the API. Then it also talks about how to use this API in PowerCLI, how to use it in VCF SDK, and how to use it in Java SDK. So rather than focusing on a single tool, we now bring back the focus on our core API, and then provide you the option of different tooling that is available to you. And then also there is an announcement blog post, which is the unified VCF SDK. What does it mean? What does it cover? And how to get started with the unified VCF SDK. Those content is also available and ready to go. Uh, but yeah, there are a few more contents that are lined up. So yeah, feel free to check out the VCF blog on a regular basis, or very easy for you to follow me or Angle to keep up to speed with what's been released in this particular space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did do a couple of short links for those that are actually watching the video. I know the majority of our audience listens on the podcast. So for those that are listening, be sure to check the show notes of the podcast or watch the video on YouTube, because there's a lot of good accompanying content. Yeah, link here is the brcm.tech, which is like the short URL for Broadcom. And there's a VCF SDK blog post that Jatin wrote, but there's also one for PowerCLI, the VCF PowerCLI. So be sure to check that one out. And then yeah, lots of content. You guys have been busy for sure, writing like you had already just alluded to the API changelog there. There's content for the VCF Python SDK, content for the VCF Java SDK, the OpenAPI spec. So many good stuff. And I know I've seen several of your demo videos recently. And we're gonna leave links to those as well. I know Jatin gets those up on the VCF YouTube channel. So just we'll make sure to add all of those to the show notes of this podcast. But really good stuff. Are you guys going? Is anybody going to Explore? What does it look like for Explore as it pertains to APIs, SDKs, and PowerCLI?
Maybe before we jump into this, to answer your question, John mentioned before a couple of minutes that we have so many documentation, and if you have to read it, you spend all your life, and maybe at the end you not know what you read and what you don't read it,
So
and
true.
what you understand and what you don't. That's why I created kind of a summary blog post that actually put on the lights the developer broadcom.com portal. This is the place where we are releasing the API documentation, the place where we are releasing the SDKs again, PowerCLI, and all this stuff. And I created a short summary blog post that highlighted a couple of links, couple of documentations that are definitely needed for our customers. Like if you are a new customer to Python SDK, you have all the needed links, how to get started, how to leverage the samples. Something really important is that, before we don't have a general repository where we store all the samples. We rely on the community. We don't know which of the samples are working. We didn't test them. So it was kind of, challenging for our customers to use our samples. But with the VCF 9.0, we built a sample repository for Java SDK and for Python SDK. So now when you go there, you can use all the samples available. They are tested, they are working. We are proving that they are working, and we'll keep testing them, and we'll keep adding more and more Python and Java samples in this repository. So this kind of a few highlights I want just to mention before we jump into the VMware Explore. By the way, I'm with a T-shirt from the last year Explore. So yeah.
Aha, very nice, very nice.
Me too.
Very good. So yeah, who's at it? Are you guys at Explore? Are there going to be some good sessions that people need to be registering for? And if so, I'll leave the links to them in the show notes. But what are we thinking about for Explore?
Me and Angle are doing API SDK kind of what's new session. And then I have one of the excellent colleague with me, Drew, who will be pairing with Angle to get into some of these details in deep dive. So there is another session on that. I'll be at Explore and we'll be talking about one more cool project, which is Holodeck. Again,
Nice.
it's a result of all the great things that PowerCLI has to offer. It's a PowerShell based model, PowerCLI based model. So we'll be demonstrating Holodeck at Explore as well. And then I'm still doing some of the hyperscaler stuff. So there are a few sessions on AVS. So yeah, feel free to check out some of these sessions, and happy to chat over there. It's going to be an exciting one.
Nice. Yeah. And John and I will be there as well, and we're going to be presenting Virtually Speaking podcast booth. We're going to be interviewing customers, partners, anybody with a good story. So be sure to come by the booth and do that. But also for you gentlemen, we'd love to actually have you come on the booth. I'd love to see what you guys are doing, talk about the sessions that you have, but also, yeah, I'm always up for a good holodeck conversation. What about you, John?
I'm looking forward to it. Vegas is going to be awesome this year. I've got some great sessions, and I'm looking forward to some great guests at the booth. And if ever, any of the listeners are coming, come on by. We'll probably have some shirts or other giveaways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, Angel and Jatin, always a pleasure speaking with you guys. Glad to finally get you, Angel, on the podcast. Don't be a stranger. Please feel free to join us again. Any closing thoughts before we take off from either of you?
Yeah, we are excited. Like you said, the Vegas is coming, is knocking on the door. So many sessions we have all together here. I'll be also on the boot camp duty, so whoever is interested can come and catch up and talk more about the APIs, SDKs, and all this stuff. Really, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be part of your podcast. It's a pleasure, and like I said, it's the first time for me, but I hope it's not the last one.
Very good. Very good.
From my side, I would say if we fix the API, we fix the automation tooling that you all have been using. That includes your favorite tool, PowerCLI, Terraform, Ansible, and the SDKs. So I believe API is the key for us to deliver a better automation experience. So stay tuned. We will share more and more details as we move on. And yeah, happy to chat over, explore on some of these things. So really excited to be here.
Very good. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.